What's up, Wizards? This is Dev from that channel down there. I got another deck tech for you today. Been doing a lot of these lately. This one, Tristan Wolf, you reminded us that we're supposed to do this deck tech. I appreciate that. We've been putting it off a little too long. You're absolutely right. So here is Blue-White Control in Dragons of Tarkir Standard for you guys. This is actually, I think, a fairly good deck. So let's go ahead and kick it off. Let's go ahead and give you the creatures and stuff first, because we've got a lot of spells to work through. We got 5 creatures, all of them dragons, which is sort of the standard amount of dragons, even for a control deck here, so that we can, you know, make sure Silumgar Scorn is a little more consistent. But we've got 3 copies of Ojutai, which fairly standard, and 2 copies of Icefall Regent. Icefall Regent is super good. Both these dragons are hard to target. Icefall Regent is awesome. Helps you tap down a guy. It's a form of removal, which we are actually lacking compared to, you know, obviously an Esper blue-black control deck that has, you know, access to Hero's Downfall and a lot of other removal cards. So we need cards that remove other creatures reliably, and Icefall Regent is quite good at exactly that. So not only is he a good beater, helps, you know, he's hard to target, but helps you take out a creature. Icefall Regent is ideal for this deck, and I don't really have to go into Ojutai too much. He is the sort of standard, obvious creature that we're going to be beating up on people with. So these dragons hurt. And I might as well go ahead and tell you about our 2 Planeswalkers while I'm at it here. 1 copy of the obvious, Ugin the Spirit Dragon, because we're a control deck, and Ugin, and, you know, and also 1 copy of Narset Transcendent. Narset is cray. You see her in sideboards sometimes for like Esper or dragons and stuff. Not often, but sometimes. And in this deck, I went ahead and main decked her because we're playing like 26 spells, and everything she does is amazing. You know, you can often just draw an extra card off that first ability. And rebound, man. Rebounding some of these spells, obviously not your counters, but helping get a little extra mileage out of what removal we do have is very important, and I really like Narset in this deck. So let's go on ahead into the meat and potatoes here of this deck. This is the spells, 26 spells to be exact, starting with the obvious, 4 copies of Silumgar Scorn. There are articles all over the place about this card right now. You can find them on Wizards.com, obviously. You can find them on Star City and TCG Player, people talking about Silumgar Scorn, and how even if you don't have dragons, this is often a hard counter in the first 6 turns of the game, because we're very curved out. We got people playing everything from aggro to mid-range to control to, you know, mid-range decks that rely, ramp decks, you know, that rely on more high-costed cards, See the Unwritten, Genesis Hydra, yada yada. So, Arbor Colossus, Hornet Queen, I could keep going. But in any case, a lot of the times we are using all of our mana on most of our turns throughout the very important turns of the game. So Silumgar Scorn is a hard counter most of the time, and you really only need these 5 dragons to secure that it is a definite hard counter a good bit of the time. And obviously, if you have an Ojutai out and you swing in, they go to counter it, or they go to remove your Ojutai since you've swung, then Silumgar Scorn is obviously a hard counter against whatever removal they've got in that situation, because you've got Ojutai out on the battlefield. Same thing with Icefall Regent. If they go to remove him for whatever reason, then Silumgar Scorn is a hard counter in that situation. So you can keep their guy capped down, tap down, keep swinging in with your fat dragon. So I like Silumgar Scorn for many, many reasons, but it's one of the best counter spells in the format, maybe the best counter spell in the format, so we're playing 4 copies. We're going to stay in the counter suit for now. We're going to sort of circumvent how we normally do this and give you all the counters and all the removal and yada yada. So we're playing 4 copies of Dissolve. There are, I believe, 9 counter spells altogether in this deck, and we need more counter spells again because we don't have as reliable a removal suit. So 4 copies of Dissolve. This is the other best counterspell in the format. These control decks love Dissolve. I mean, getting to Scry is just ridiculous. So yeah, 4 copies of Dissolve. Sometimes you see 3 or even 2 in like Esper or Blue-Black, but we need all the counter magic we can get because, like I said, our removal just not as reliable. So we've got to keep things from hitting the board in the first place, and Dissolve, very good at that. One more counterspell here. We've got 1 copy of Disdainful Stroke. I was really thinking 2 to begin with, but with all of our other hard counters and some of our removal, I think that we can get away with the 1 copy in the main and then another copy in the board. We are still seeing an awful lot of aggro in the format, but that's not to say that we don't see highly costed creatures and spells, enchantments, and things like that, because we do. Disdainful Stroke will hard counter a lot of the things, especially after, you know, 3rd turn, obviously. But I really wanted to keep it down to the 1 copy. I know that people will get me for that. I also know, on another note, that people might want to cut it down to 2 Ojutai and 1 Sunscorch Regent there in the creatures, which makes sense, but I just didn't. I could go into a whole long thing about Sunscorch Regent, but I'll explain that in the comments if you want me to. Let's move on to our removal suit, which is somewhat limited, but let's go over it just the same because I feel like we've got some things here that definitely work here in this format. So we've got 2 copies of Valorous Stance to start it off. This is, I think, a no-brainer. This again makes Ojutai and Icefall even harder to target. When they do think they have a chance to kill those guys, then you can just say no. And obviously, this is removal. This takes out a lot of the important things in the format, other dragons, siege rhino, blah blah. And I think there's definitely room. It started off as 1 Valorous Stance and 1 Reprisal, but then I realized like there's no reason to do that. So went ahead and just went with 2 copies of Stance because you know flexibility is good. But most often I think we're going to be using the removal ability on it. There's 2 copies, and maybe there should be more. This card is very good, actually, of Devouring Light. Most of the important creatures in the format are important because they attack well right now. We don't have a fudge ton of activated abilities or creatures that just sit on the board and do nothing. I mean, you can make an argument for, I don't know, they still can carry at it. There are other creatures, don't get me wrong, I'm sure I'm missing some ridiculous important thing, because people do that, but Devouring Light takes out 90% of the things that we're worried about, and we are worried mostly about being attacked into. So Devouring Light is very important. We're going to be paying full cost for it, 100% of the time, but yes, Devouring Light. This removes all the creatures really that we are very, very worried about. And cute little thing here, Devouring Light is good against Ojutai. Ojutai has to attack, and when he does, loses hexproof, so Devouring Light is kind of cool against him. It's just a neat little interaction in Standard right now. But yeah, I play Devouring Light, and I might even play more. 2 copies of Last Breath. This is fantastic against aggro. We really don't care if they gain life or not. And it just, yeah. I really have to go into it. I have seen blue-white control decks that played 4 copies of Last Breath. I think that's a little overboard, honestly, especially since the format is shifting a little more towards the mid-range control side of things. So I don't think we need all 4 copies of Last Breath in the main, but I will play 2 in the main because we see aggro enough and it's so good against us that we absolutely have to have a safety valve against it. So these will come out against some other decks, but obviously Last Breath is good against aggro, and we absolutely need that more than pretty much anything. So we have a good game against mid-range and even other control decks because we have an abundance of counterspells over them when they have a grip full of removal that doesn't really apply against us. 1 and only 1 copy of Banishing Light in the main deck here. There are other cards that we could use. I think that Banishing Light is really good, though, as just the one of. I might even up that. I know some people would be like, dude, play 3 copies. But I really want instant speed removal above all else in this deck. Banishing Light, obviously, gets rid of any threat. Planeswalkers, I believe, included there. So, yeah, Banishing Light is quite good in a control build. I just don't want to spend a whole turn and maybe even tap out if we need to on a card like this, a permanent. And I just don't feel like there's a whole lot of room for cards like this in the deck, but it is a hard answer to 99% of the things in the format that are going to be bothering us. So, yeah, I play at least the 1 copy of this. Let me know how you feel. I don't know if some people... This is very polarizing. Some people are going to be like, no Banishing Light. Some people are going to be like, 4 Banishing Light. Play 8 Banishing Light. So I'm going to go with just the 1 in the main. It is usually good when we see it, but we don't want to flood out on this too much because we have to play mana. We have to spend mana on our turn to play this card, and I just don't like doing that unless we're playing something that can win the game for us, like Ojutai. There's another card we have to tap mana on our turn for, but this one is a lot more excusable. This is, well, let's actually just give you the mass removal suit because we might as well. There's 2 copies of End Hostilities and 1 copy of Perilous Vault for the same reasons. We could just play more End Hostilities. I know that some people are going to be like, wow. But Perilous Vault is very good. Exiling is something that we want to do, and the fact that it's colorless and doesn't require an intensive white commitment is also pretty good. So, and we don't really see a whole lot of ways of taking out artifacts. I mean, people playing Inox Survivalist, Reclamation Sage sometimes, but those are usually meant strictly for enchantments. Not to say they won't use them on our Perilous Vault, but still. Vault is something that a lot of people are playing for good reason, and we're no different. End Hostilities is, I don't have to really say anything on that one. We need mass removal in this deck against aggro and even mid-range so that we can then start dropping our threats, and you know, follow up on our counter spells and all that. I mean, we need mass removal in a control deck, and this is what we have access to, so we're playing this. And finally, for the spells, let's go over our advantage suit, for lack of a better term. We've got 3 copies of Anticipate here, and some people might want to play 4. Anticipate, obviously an incredible card. And 4 copies of Dig Through Time. Dig Through Time is in the top 3 cards in the entire format. It's one of those, like, have you read this card? Dig Through Time is just so incredibly good. We do have fetch lands, we do have lots of spells, so we have many, many ways of facilitating Dig, and Dig does all the things we need for us, you know, for it to do. And Anticipate is like a mini version of Dig, or a crappier version of Impulse, but in any case, Anticipate is also an incredible card. Helps us out in the early game. We didn't have to counter anything. Let's Anticipate. We need to dig for a counterspell. Let's Anticipate. We need to dig for removal. Anticipate. There's just so many applications for both of these cards. Anticipate, though, in the early game helps us dig for what we need, and Dig helps us dig for our finishers, or even in a pinch, you know, helps us dig for counters or removal, just whatever we need. And these are 2 of the best advantage cards pretty much ever printed, honestly, and we need them. So yeah, we're playing those. Well, let me go ahead and post the lands right here. They write themselves. We just need fetch lands to both make sure that we are consistent in our mana base and fuel Dig Through Time, which is pretty important. 2 Haven of the Spirit Dragon is pretty cool because we've got dragons and we got to get back our Ugin in case he gets removed somehow. And the rest writes itself. Temple of Enlightenment. We need to gain lands against aggro and mid-range sometimes because they're getting really fast. So yeah, that's the lands. I really don't feel like you need to tweak this too much. It's very consistent. And while I sort of finish off this deck tech and talk about final thoughts on this deck, let's go ahead and post the board right here, which is fairly self-explanatory. I think this looks like a great deal of control boards. As far as the deck goes, I feel like this deck is actually fairly highly powered. Can it go toe-to-toe against the other important control decks in the format? Absolutely. We don't have that many creatures that they need to worry about removing, and we have more counter spells than they do, like I mentioned before. So against other control decks, we are actually pretty well equipped, honestly, even after boards. So I'm not that worried about opposing control decks because we have ways of dealing with their threats. We do, once they drop a Silumgar the Drifting Death or Ojutai, something with hexproof that's really hard for us to deal with. We have to Perilous Vault, we have to End Hostilities. I don't know of too many other ways of getting rid of those problematic creatures, but we can counter them more efficiently and more consistently. So I like our game against other control decks. Against mid-range, we have about the same game as the other control decks. Although, yeah, about the same. Although I would like access to some of Black's more premium removal. Against aggro, though, we have a serious issue. We are fairly slow, and we have not as good removal as the other control decks, like I've said. So aggro is a bit of an issue for us, and there's a lot of aggro going around. The mono red, stuff like that you see really puts us in a rough spot, but after boards we do much better. So I feel like this deck is fairly highly powered and is good at the sort of paper, rock, scissors game that we see evolving in Standard right now, where mid-range control are pulling away from aggro, but we still see a fair amount of aggro. Let me know how you feel about this deck, because I like it a fair amount. I definitely think that this could be a thing, sort of a top 8 thing. Maybe not going all the way, but I do feel like this could top 8 fairly easily. So, yeah, let us know in the comments how you feel about this one. I like it. You know, like, share, subscribe, all those things. They help us out a lot. We're trying to grow as a channel, and I want to keep doing this. So please help us grow as a channel. Like, share, comment, subscribe, do all those things that take just a couple of seconds. And check out our other videos. Check out our channel. We've got a lot of good deck tech, some good MTG news on there. And when MTG Origins Spoilers hits, we're going to be right there. I love spoiler season, and it's the best time of the whole year, and I love covering it too. So, yeah, subscribe to our channel. We're Strictly Better MTG, and I'm Devin from said channel. I'll see you kids next time. Thanks for watching, Wizards.